Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Films and Stuff. I'm Ethan, joined by my erstwhile cohort, Pete. Hey, Pete, what's up today?
Not much. How are you, buddy?
Everything is great. Today, the name of the game is Stream or Skip. Regular listeners know the rules, but Pete, you've got them memorized. Why don't you recap quickly, and then we'll dive into it.
Absolutely. Ethan has prepared a list of TV shows he'd like me to watch. I have prepared the same for him. Every week, we randomly assign each other one TV series to watch. We watch at least 2 episodes that week. And on the basis of that 2 episodes, we determine, is that show worthy of being streamed or skipped?
Boom. That's exactly right. And without further ado, what was my assignment for you this week?
So this week, I had to watch our first feature-length program.
That's right.
I watched a documentary on Apple TV Plus called Still, a Michael J. Fox movie.
Michael J. Fox. Is it a documentary?
Yeah, for lack of a better phraseology or definition, it's definitely a documentary.
Or like a biopic?
You're right, because what they've done for this documentary, which is unlike others, is they've hired actors to reenact pivotal moments in Michael J. Fox's early life. So you see like Michael J. Fox as a child, you see him as a teenager, you see him as a young adult. They've done it in such a way that some of it looks like found footage and some of it looks like archival, like, news footage and things like that. And some of it you can't tell what is dramatized, for lack of a better word.
How big of a Michael J. Fox fan were you going into this?
So that's a really interesting question, because I think I became a bigger Michael J. Fox fan after this than I was going in.
Oh, really?
It's not that I didn't like Michael J. Fox. Quite the contrary. Michael J. Fox was, especially in our, youth, our adolescence, our teenage years, was quite the, let's say, acting force. But I think that because the internet wasn't around back then, because, you didn't have things like TMZ, blaring out celebrity gossip culture so strongly every day, I think we kind of took it for granted how big of a star Michael J. Fox actually was.
Yeah, I mean, spoiler alert, I watched this as well. And I agree with you, which is now I feel like we know almost everything about our celebrities. Like we know their background, where they started from, and usually they start kind of young, so we kind of get to see them progress. Michael J. Fox, to me, just kind of like appeared as like mid-20s or early 20s. Like he was just there, and he was a star in Family Ties. He was in Teen Wolf, and then he was a mega star in the Back to the Future trilogy. And then, as far as I'm aware, he kind of went away for a while, and he came back with Spin City. And then, of course, that kind of was similar when he announced, his Parkinson's disease, correct?
Yeah.
After that, he's kind of like stayed a little bit out of the limelight with occasional cameos and interviews and stuff.
That's right. So he had a couple of great cameos in shows like Scrubs, for example, in Curb Your Enthusiasm, for example. He also did a season, maybe 2 of another sitcom, but like it was well understood that he had Parkinson's as a character in that sitcom.
Right.
You're right. He definitely took a step back after the announcement, but I think he slowly eased himself back into, let's say, the public eye.
Yeah.
As with most documentaries, the value of whether that documentary is going to strike a chord with you or not ultimately is determined by how interested you are in the subject of said documentary.
Yeah.
I happen to be a big fan of Michael J. Fox. Most people in our age bracket, you would consider Back to the Future as like required watching, even if you didn't really like sci-fi.
Right.
It was a seminal movie of, that era.
Yeah.
I would say of all the time travel movies we've ever seen, there's a reason people refer to Back to the Future as the benchmark or baseline consistently. including so far as Endgame with the Avengers. Even they refer to it.
And the Flash.
And the Flash. Exactly. So
yeah.
I know I'm not saying much, but effectively it's a relatively short documentary. It's about how he got started in his career, how he dealt with the fame, how he developed Parkinson's, how he tried to hide it, the backlash, and some of the support, all of that kind of stuff. And where he is now. I mean, genuinely speaking, this is really raw. So you see a lot of Michael J. Fox unfiltered, which is to say they're not curating the footage. When he's talking to the camera, he admits he's in incredible pain all the time. When you see him walking, you can see he stumbles and literally falls over at times. But even when he does, he makes a joke about it. You see him go through his physiotherapy routines and like all the struggles that he's going through, not just the struggles that he's gone through. Like, you know, we see that in a lot of biopics, or we see that in a lot of documentaries about celebrities. Oh, well, this guy had this drug problem and this is how he overcame it. He doesn't have a problem with drugs. He's got a physiological or neurological problem. This is about how he struggles to deal with it or not, as the case may be. For someone who hasn't seen a lot of Michael J. Fox, it's going to be jarring, like it was to me, because I had always seen Michael J. Fox in curated environments, i.e. on TV or in movies. So when you see him walking down the streets of New York, the motion, the fact that he stumbles, the fact that he has a hard time walking straight, it makes you really think about it for a second, right? Like about all the things that we take for granted, and that this guy is not just struggling with, but how he overcomes that. He's so strong. And you know, everyone uses the word, oh, well, that guy's brave, that guy's strong. Like, I really got a sense of, man, this guy is really brave and this guy is really strong. So it made me feel really good to see that, despite the fact that you never really want to feel good about seeing someone suffer. Yeah. So anyway, in terms of rating, ultimately, as with all documentaries, you have to really like the subject to want to watch it. If you're not interested in water crisis, if you're not interested in poverty crisis, you're not going to sit through and watch a Michael Moore documentary. Like, it's not, that's not an entertainment thing. That's more of an educational thing. And that's the same way for this. I happen to really like Michael J. Fox. So for me, I finished the entire thing. I think this is a solid mooch. I also think it's incredibly difficult for a documentary to be a must subscribe, purely because of the nature of what a documentary is. Generally speaking, how many times are you going to watch the same documentary over and over again? I would wager once you've seen it once, that's it. Under very exceptional circumstances, you might watch it a second time. Which is why I can't give it a must subscribe, although it's a very good program. I would highly recommend people watch it. I just don't think you need to subscribe to Apple TV Plus to get it.
I think you said something which makes a lot of sense, which is, to me, a documentary that you must watch is one that really shows something behind the scenes of a very, very famous episode or situation, right? And I thought the best part of this documentary was when he knew that he had Parkinson's, right? He was kind of diagnosed, he knew he had it, and he didn't tell anyone around him. And he explained, and they showed some footage where he was trying to hide it, right? Like he said, I always held something in my hand. I always had paper. I always had a pen.
Or was checking his watch constantly.
He's like, I always held something. And then you saw, I think, like a few episodes of Spin City where they kind of like circled, you know, where his hand was held like someone who has Parkinson's, right? Where if you're just watching the episode, you wouldn't have noticed it. But when they kind of slowed it down and like freeze framed it, you could see like, wow, like he was even in that episode, like suffering and trying to hide it a little bit. I thought that was not the best part of the documentary, but I thought that was the most gripping in the sense that it showed something new that you would not have known unless you had that documentary. The rest of it, I totally agree. It is very raw. He is presented in all of his agony, the challenges that his family faces with him. I mean, he's brave in the sense that he really gave an unvarnished look at what his life looks like. And it's quite challenging, right? There's a lot of parts that are not very glamorous. He didn't dress up. He didn't even kind of comb his hair or anything. He really gave an intimate look of what his day-to-day life and routine is like. So
yeah, absolutely.
very, very likable actor. When Family Ties and Back to the Future were out, he was at the Hollywood pinnacle, right? I mean, there was no one bigger than him. And I thought it was interesting also that he gave a little bit of a look at how much he was struggling in Hollywood before he got some of those roles, right? I mean, he was living a pretty tough life where he said he was eating ketchup packets and
yeah, he would take the Smucker's jams from IHOP.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's definitely a mooch, but it's a very, very solid biopic on Michael J. Fox and his life and career.
As the youths say online, your mileage may vary.
Yeah.
And that's genuinely the right way to think about this. If you're a fan of Back to the Future, if you're a fan of Michael J. Fox, you should definitely watch this if and when you get the opportunity.
That is still on Apple TV Plus. Your assignment to me, Pete, was a Korean TV series named The Black Knight. It's on Netflix. It came out in May 2023, so it's relatively new. And I watched 3 episodes. The background is thus. It is a dystopian world. It's kind of outside of Seoul, Korea, somewhere in Korea. And the entire world has become this totally destroyed place. We're not given any background as to why, whether there's nuclear war or environment or so forth. There is so much air pollution that everything becomes kind of dependent on the delivery of oxygen tanks and oxygen masks. And of course, there's kind of a ruling class that has these underground, beautiful kind of fabricated grass, kind of environmental places. And then the kind of the working class, the refugees are living above ground and in just kind of very gray, drab cement complexes, and they get oxygen tanks delivered to them basically on schedule. And the Black Knight, his job is a delivery person for the oxygen tanks, but he's also kind of a freedom fighter where he's trying to protect the refugees, and he's also trying to, at the same time, kind of bring down what is this amorphous government conspiracy to use the refugee labor to build their new underground wonder cave or something.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but is this similar to Mad Max, except in terms of instead of oxygen, where Mad Max was about water, right?
It's very similar to that. And I have to say, the oxygen is what you would call the MacGuffin, to be honest.
I see. Okay.
This doesn't really figure into it. I mean, they talk about the oxygen deliveries a lot, and people wear masks, oxygen masks, and then they don't wear oxygen masks. It's a little bit inconsistent in terms of when they need a mask, when they don't need a mask. I'd say at a high level, it's a very plucky Korean drama that has a lot of undertones in terms of the ruling elite versus kind of the surviving class or the refugee class. Apparently, this is based on a cartoon or a webtoon. The Black Knight is kind of like the hero for the underclass, taking on the elite. I mean, there's some things to it, I have to say. The lead characters is pretty compelling. Some of the supporting characters are pretty compelling. That's positive about it. But I have to say, and I don't mean this really as dismissively as it may sound, but this is kind of a very typical Korean drama where these themes are just so in your face that they obscure any other type of, storytelling or messaging. And I know that it's translated, it's a Korean film, so it's obviously translated into both English or dubbed into English, and there's subtitles. But the dialogue is very straightforward and leads nothing to the imagination. So for example, there's a lot of lines like, the rebellions are fighting back, make sure that you kill them all. There's nothing kind of left to the imagination. The plot is just kind of force-fed to you. There's a lot of action sequences and explosions and shootouts and stuff. It's a good effort. I mean, it's definitely not something that I felt the need to turn off in the middle of the episodes, and I watched 3 episodes. But to be honest, there's nothing really interesting about it. The dystopian future is not particularly interesting. The MacGuffin about the oxygen is not particularly interesting. The fight of the wealthy elite versus kind of the poor working class is not particularly novel. So I'm giving this a skip, but I have to say, I didn't feel the need to like turn it off immediately. I was just kind of like a little bit distracted, doing some second screening, looking at some other stuff. It was fine to listen to the English. It was also fine to read the subtitles. I was okay with both. But again, there was nothing particularly interesting about the plot or the political machinations or anything. It's a very typical kind of action political drama. So I give this a skip.
Okay, that's
Better
fine.
luck
I
next
was
time.
hoping for more, to be honest. I
Yeah.
thought that, generally speaking, how we tend to have a little bit of bias for Apple TV programs, I tend to have a little bit of bias, a positive bias for Korean programs.
Yeah.
They have a little bit of a more novel perspective on their program. So I was hoping for more, but that's fine. That's, you know what? That's precisely what this series is for. I think this kind of helps us better understand what the international perspective of some of these shows are, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Netflix has committed to spending $2.5 billion in Korean programming, and we can't expect $2.5 billion worth of Squid Games kind of programming.
That's right. But I also feel like this is a show that was a little bit formulaically put together,
right,
to kind of take advantage of a lot of those big themes, right? I mean, the Black Knight, the name alone, kind of evokes what's happening in Marvel and DC and other kind of like superhero genres, right? The idea of, again, the ruling elite versus kind of like the oppressed class. We've seen this in so many things, right? There's no like third party in the middle, to kind of make this triangulate, to play them off against each other. It's very clear good versus evil, right? The wealthy people are bad, the poor people are good, they're being oppressed. He's kind of like the champion of them. Again, the oxygen is really a MacGuffin that doesn't really have a lot of basis for like any episode. And then you do see some elements of kind of like Squid Game inspiration, some of the other kind of like Survivor type movies and shows that we've seen in the past, right?
Yeah.
In any case, no harm, no foul. That's why we go through it. It pops up very, very prominently on Netflix. And I hope that you've got something in store for me next week that will give me some good enthusiasm. What do you got?
Oh, so it's actually interesting. So for next week, I had originally drawn for myself a show on Amazon Prime called Island.
Ah,
Also a foreign language or Korean language drama or action. Spoiler alert, I have taken that out from my rotation for the time being. And any show that's on Amazon Prime for me on Stream or Skip, I am going to be not skipping, but I'm going to be delaying for the time being, because no matter what I try, despite the fact that I am an Amazon Prime subscriber, despite the fact that
Amazon.
I am paying with a British credit card, I cannot access Amazon Prime while I'm in India for
Honestly, that's nonsense. Totally
maybe 40,
nonsense.
50% of the shows.
That's totally nonsense.
So when I selected the island this week, I just did a sanity check before to see if it was available. And of course, what's the first thing that greets me? This series is not available to you in your location.
Come on, Amazon.
I said, okay, maybe it's
Fix
a
this
VPN
shit.
issue.
Yeah.
Let me sign on with my VPN, legitimate Amazon Prime account. Logged on. What's the new sign? We've determined that you are using a VPN to access this program, and this program cannot be accessed by you.
Must say, Amazon definitely has the best technology for identifying the use of VPNs, but for what purpose are they trying to prevent someone who has validly paid for an account to not watch a show that they've paid for?
It makes no sense to me that
Yeah.
that is an issue because, as far as I could tell, in India, Island isn't available on any other streaming platform that's native to India. So it's not on Netflix India. It's not on Hotstar. It's not on Disney Plus. It's not on any of the other platforms that theoretically are available on. So that tells me that this isn't a licensing issue or a conflict of licensing issue.
That's right.
But even if it were, that's irrelevant because, again, Amazon cannot expect that its subscribers won't from time to time be traveling. So in lieu of that, I have selected, or I have been randomly assigned, Reservation Dogs on Hulu.
Oh, okay.
So I am quite keen on this. I've been wanting to watch this for maybe more than a year now, but because it was on my list, I've been holding off.
Right.
It's Taika Waititi's show.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. I hope it's good. So that's for me. Next week, you, however, will be on Amazon Prime. You're going to be watching a show called The Power.
The Power?
Yeah. But in the meantime, if you have a show that you'd like us to watch, hopefully not on Amazon Prime, reach out to us. You can tweet at us at F&S Podcast. You can DM us on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast. You can email us aloha@filmsandstuffpodcast.com, or you can leave a comment below this video. We will definitely make sure that we find a way to watch it, and we will give you our unfiltered opinion on the show.
So that is stream or skip for this week. Next week, we've got Island on Amazon and Reservation Dogs on Hulu.
Perfect. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Stay tuned. We've got some other episodes coming up soon you will not want to miss. But for today, that's it. And we'll see you guys on the next episode of Films and Stuff.
Thanks, Ethan.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.